Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Rose and Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunella Rosa. Plenty going on, but this week we're going back to our sort of usual bread and butter of central bank and monetary policy. We're looking around the world at some of the most important central banks and analyzing suggestions that there will be more rate hikes to come before the tightening cycle ends.
Yeah.
Three big banks sort of we want to talk about, but let's start perhaps the most important one at the Fed. They made an important decision to skip the June meeting. What does that mean, Brunello?
Yeah, so the Fed has been busy in a tightening cycle for the last year and a half by now. And they have increased rates effectively kind of in every meeting, depending on the meeting, the size change from 25 basis point to 50 to 75 at some point. 75 seemed to be the new norm at some point, and then they scaled back to 50 and then 25. In the scaling back, effectively, the idea is how do you scale back without stopping? Well, you start skipping meetings. So you hike not at every meeting, but for example, at every other meeting. Um, Clearly, the difference between a skip and a pause is that the skip is like I'm in a tightening cycle. I'm doing every meeting. I skip one, then I do another one. Maybe I skip another one, and so on. A pause is instead when the central bank has reached a certain level that is satisfied with and then stays there before doing anything else, which could be further increases or cuts. Now, the Fed has made it clear what the direction of travel is. There are more hikes to come. So the question is how you put them around the year. And in this, the SEP dots, so the famous projections, if you want, of the Federal Reserve FOMC, effectively said that the FOMC expects two more hikes because of this year instead of just one more, as it was expected prior to this meeting. And so, when are they going to deliver that? Now, all bets are off, of course, but there are some indications. So Powell said that July will be a live meeting, meaning it could be a meeting in which this will happen. Uh, People wouldn't say things like this unless they thought that something will, in fact, happen. And then if they didn't increase rates in July, instead of being June a skip, it would look like the beginning of a pause. So I think July is kind of a done deal. 25 basis points. Then the question is what's next? Um, they have three more meetings, September, November, December. So when are they going to do that? It's hard to say, but potentially they might, every meeting will be live, but if they follow kind of a sort of symmetric, how can I say, sequence, they did May, they skip June, they do July, they might skip September, and go for November, and skip December to end the tightening cycle and begin effectively pause. A pause that most likely will lead to eventually cutting interest rates, but rates are likely to stay high for quite a considerable amount of time, for a few months into 2024 before the Fed conceives cutting rates.
All right. And if we look sort of across the pond, the Governing Council of the ECB, the European Central Bank, met on Thursday, made some important announcements. Do these mirror what the Fed is on track to do?
Yeah, it's similar, but of course with some differences, considering that the ECB started later and from a lower point. Let's not forget the deposit rate was in negative territory, it was minus 50 basis points. And now it's been raised to 350 with the 25 basis point increase decided in June. And Lagarde has already said that July is going to be a meeting in which most likely there will be another increase. So we go to 375. That's for some people have been considered kind of the sort of happy mean between the various requests within the governing council. Somebody wanted 450, somebody wanted 3. or something like that. So 375 seemed like the happy medium. Uh, in our opinion, though, as inflation remains sticky, uh, and the ECB is in a tightening cycle, and the fact that Lagarde used the plural when talking about decisions rather than decision, referring only to July, it seems like they are talking about more meetings with rate hike, which suggests, and if the Fed does two more, then the ECB is more likely to do at least two more, concluding July. So I would expect the deposit rate to be brought to around 4% by the end of the year. Maybe even slightly more so if inflation doesn't come up.
Yeah. And sort of these central banks, one that might be doing something a little bit different seems to be here at home. Sorry, it seems to be the Bank of Japan, the BOJ. And something important they did just the day after the ECB came out with its decision. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean the BOJ has been the outlier throughout because they don't feel that inflation is as pressing as they should be. If anything, inflation is above 2%, but if anything, they've been chasing inflation for decades, and if anything, they might be happy that finally they see some positive inflation, though their deflation was entrenched in the demographics of the country, in the way they organize the work, the labor force participation rating, especially for women. So it's not just a chance that they've been living through this deflation phase for so long. So this bout of inflation they're experiencing is likely to be short-lived, which is the reason why the BOJ doesn't feel like this monthly the entire architecture that they put in place, because eventually inflation may fall below 2% and they will be back to square one. Though there has been a change in the central bank governor, Ueda has replaced Kuroda, and clearly it will take some time for the new governor to coalesce behind him enough of a majority to go in any direction he wants. So that's why it's kind of a wait and see situation for them.
I see. And importantly, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England will meet on Wednesday and on Thursday to deliver possibly rate increases. Are they going to mirror what's been happening across the pond on the American side?
Yeah, so the Bank of England does meet this week as well, and they are most likely to increase rates by at least 25 basis points. Inflation has been sticky in the UK also because of Brexit and therefore all the supply side constraints that come with that. Then all the strikes and therefore the wage requests and all of that. So clearly they have made much more work to do. They will go to 4.75% with base rate, but there are expectations of the BOE peaking around 6% as opposed to 5.5% as it was until a few days ago. So it will be much more in line with the Fed and the ECB than the BOJ. In reality, the BOJ has somebody that has gone even further in that direction, and that's the PBOC, Central Bank of China, that has in fact cut rates twice in the last couple of weeks, clearly to support domestic demand in the face of the weak activity that has been registered in Europe and the US. So as you see, there's a spectrum of views within central banks. Somebody's cutting PBOC, somebody's staying on hold. BOJ, somebody's increasing. So Fed, ECB, Bank of England, but let's not forget also Bank of Canada, RBA, all the central banks that we monitor and watch. There are, of course, various degrees. The key point is that inflation is an ugly beast. It needs to be defeated once and for all, and central banks have the instrument to do so. So they will not stop until they believe that time has come to declare victory. Clearly, this time has not arrived just yet.
Yeah. It seems that there are early projections of inflation not being as sticky, have proven wrong, and that's sort of what the kind of entire Western world is coalescing around. And meanwhile, you look at sort of more emerging markets, like India and China, and then they seem to have it in a completely different direction. So,
Yeah.
two very kind of interesting ways the monetary system's evolving. Something we'll continue to follow in the sort of weeks and months to come. As always, Brunel, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Until next time.